So we've got our first panelist on the line already, and we're so excited to have Patrick van Veen with us. Patrick has been a very long-standing friend of the Jane Goodall Institute. He is currently a chair of Emeritus Global Board, chair of the Captive Welfare Strategy Work Group, and also chair of the Chimpanzee Work Group. We're really thrilled to have you here today, Patrick, and we appreciate your valuable time. We're excited to hear what you have to share with us about chimpanzees.
Thank you, Rita. I think my time is not that valuable. I think it's just exciting to celebrate today World Chimpanzee Day. So I want to start and say to everybody, happy World Chimpanzee Day. Fantastic to join you. The biggest challenge for me today was to think, when we talk about chimpanzees, there is so much to talk about. And I thought, okay, what I'm going to start with today, to share with you, to talk with, I think it's good to share a few things that I love to talk about. That is mainly also about studying chimpanzee behavior. In my daily life, additional to everything I do around JGI, the Jane Goodall Institute, I'm studying human behavior and I'm studying chimpanzee behavior. And one of the reasons I do the combination is that I try to understand a little bit better our human behavior. But the good thing is, by studying chimpanzees, you learn, of course, not only about our human nature, you learn also a lot, of course, about the chimpanzees. Actually, some of the people sometimes forget about it, but the reason that Louis Leakey sent the 3 Leakey girls 62 years ago, it's today, that Jane was the first of the 3 Leakey girls. The other ones were, of course, Burti Galdikas going to study orangutans, and Diane Fossey to study the gorillas. The reason Louis Leakey came up with the idea is that he said, if we want to understand the human nature and the evolution of human nature, we should start to understand the behavior of our closest relatives, our cousins. And these cousins are, for example, the chimpanzees. And I'm happy to talk today about these chimpanzees and give you a few more insights about their behavior. I could talk, I think, hours about all these individuals I'm showing now to you. Many of them are, I think, really individual, different personalities. And I love to talk about chimpanzee personality. Some of them that I just show you are living in the rainforest, in wild nature, some of them living in sanctuaries or zoos. And when I talk today about chimpanzees, I think I will make a combination of the knowledge we know from both environments, the wild environment, but also the captive environment. And captive environment, I would like to say, it's not the captive environment. These are the chimpanzees that are under human care. I always say they are our family. That gives us also a responsibility, but that makes also that we can learn a lot of them. And maybe just, I think this is something many of you know. When we look, for example, to the region where we can find nowadays chimpanzees, and I say explicit nowadays, because we know that the ranging area of chimpanzees was much wider in the past. We see that we have several countries where we still can find wild chimpanzees in West Africa. We find there also a subspecies called the West African chimpanzees. Think about Senegal. Our colleague Fadi is going to talk about the research and knowledge in that area. But we have also countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, and a few more small spots of areas where we still can find the Western chimpanzee. Then we have in Central Africa a large area where we can find chimpanzees, and I think the best known are Gabon, Guinea and Congo, of course. But interestingly, in Congo, we find also this other species of chimpanzees, the bonobo. I'm not going to talk today about the bonobo, but what is so unique is that southern of the Congo River, we find the bonobo. And as a European, I'm living in Belgium, I'm Dutch. When I look to a river very close to my house, a river in the Netherlands or in Belgium is, what is it, 200 meters wide. And that's really nothing. When I'm in Africa and some other parts of the world, I sometimes see these rivers that look more like a lake. And that's also what the Congo River looks like. And that was always a very strong barrier between the animals or the chimpanzees, the pygmy chimpanzees living south of that river, the bonobos, as we speak about nowadays, and northern of that river, we will find the chimpanzees. When we move a little bit more to the east, we find there also the eastern chimpanzees, like we call them, and that is in Tanzania, part of Congo still, and also Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda. That is where we can find the chimpanzees. As we all know, and I won't talk too much about that today, they are all very much threatened in their survival. And that's not only the number that is decreasing, but also that all these spots, these look as large areas where we can't find chimpanzees when you look to this map. But what we need to realize in real life, these are all these small patches where we can find sometimes very isolated small groups of chimpanzees. And that's the biggest threat to chimpanzees, is that they are so scattered around in these small areas where they still can survive. And that's also why it is important. And one of the missions also of Jane Goodall Institute, to build everywhere these corridors between these small isolated areas where the chimpanzees are still living. When we look to chimpanzees, and in my daily life, I compare them to humans, or better, I compare humans to chimpanzees, there are a few very important similarities that tell you something about their behavior. First of that is they are very social animal. They always live in social groups. Isolating a chimpanzee is nearly giving a chimpanzee death sentence. Like humans, you want to be and you need to be part of a social group. And your behavior is also influenced by the rest of the social group. Humans and chimpanzees are only 1.4% in genetic material different. And 1.4, how much it is, it's very difficult to qualify, but I sometimes compare it with gorillas and chimpanzees that have more than 3% difference in the genetic material. And then the life stages. What I love to study in chimpanzees is their childhood. From young babies growing up, becoming teenagers, young adults, and we see that they have a very long childhood, which is nearly 1/4 of their lifespan, that they can behave and that they actually are acting as youngsters, as teenagers, and that is extremely long in nature. And it's similar as in human. We have similar life stages to surviving. And then our brain development. Everybody is always astonished about the knowledge, the intelligence of chimpanzees. And I think there are much more similarities in our brain development than we would think of. And one of these small things is the intelligence. When we talk about that, is also the body and using the mirror. And this tells you something about emotional, social intelligence of chimpanzees. Chimpanzees can lie, they can manipulate, because they can put themselves in your perspective. They know what you are observing and what you are seeing. And chimpanzees can sometimes manipulate and say, come a little bit closer to me, start to groom themselves, inviting you to come close, until the moment they can grab you and bite in your fingers. And chimpanzees can be very kind, they can be very gentle, but their intention can be different, and sometimes they can be very mean. And that's part of the social intelligence. Just like we humans, we can manipulate, we can lie, and sometimes we can behave very nice towards somebody, but we have then a different intention. But to understand a little bit more about the social behavior of chimpanzees, actually we should look to what chimps are eating. And I think dietists can talk hours about chimp food and digestion. Will keep it very short. Chimps are eating several food opportunities. The first of that is they eat a lot of fruit. Berries, figs is very favorite of chimpanzees. Everything you can say that contains sugar. But what we also see, and you can analyze the chimpanzee poop, and you will find also parts of nuts, you will find seeds. Chimpanzees are very favored sometimes for nuts because it contains oils, essential oils, and that is a very good addition to the food. But we know also very important, the ant fishing by chimpanzees. So insects is an important part of the food because this food can also seen as an addition with containing proteins, which are very important for the chimpanzees diet. But chimpanzees are also hunters. However, when we talk about hunting, some people sometimes have the idea that you will observe everyday hunting behavior by chimpanzees, but it is only a small additional part to their food. So what we see, the main thing they are eating are nuts, fruits, like the figs, the berries. They eat insects when insects are available, ants, termites, and additional to that, they will eat also, of course, meat. But it is more a seldom opportunity they use. When they have the opportunity to hunt, they will do it. But it's not something that is in their daily or weekly routine. Like sometimes people use that as an example that people should also eat meat because chimpanzees do it. Yes, but it is, I would say, more rarely than that it is a daily opportunity they use. Observing chimpanzees eating their fruits and like figs, which are very favorite to them, you start also to realize that the feeding pattern has an influence on their social behavior. Because when we talk that the main component of their food pattern, different from, for example, gorillas who are eating leaves and stem, that if you're eating fruits, it's not always available at any moment during the year. So what you see is chimpanzees start to build a territory where they have enough trees, food providing trees, so the group can survive on that limited amount of trees. And these trees are protected, and we call that a territory protected by the chimpanzees. And that's also where you see when we look at primates like chimpanzees who are fruit-eating primates, fruit that is not always at any time available during the year, you see that they have an area that they start to protect, and that says also something about their cooperation. The male coalitions we, for example, see. Different from gorillas who have food that is always available. And food and social behavior are nearly always linked within primate groups. So if you understand what type of food a primate eats, then you understand also a little bit better how the social behavior functions. And that indicates also that chimpanzees, for example, have very strong male bondings. This is an example in Kibale Forest in Uganda, where you see the two males come close together, where one is submissive and saying that he supports the alpha male in the group. And this is part of the coalition building between the males, and these male coalitions, they are so important also to defend the territory and so also defend the food resources. Grooming is another important social behavior that keeps a strong bonding between the group members, and that is also important for the males. Or in this example, you see two chimpanzees in a zoo environment. These two males had a fight, but after the fight, they look after each other. They start a grooming session, and the introduction of that session starts with some kind of handshake, which is an appeasement behavior, because you need each other to defend the territory. So sometimes you can have conflicts, but you need also each other to keep a strong bonding within the group. So the last minute, I want to talk about the stages of life. I told already about it. It's so important to look through the stages and different stages of life and realizing that chimpanzees are 1/4 of their life youngsters. Being born after 8.5 months, similar as to humans, the pregnancy is. And after 8.5 months, a very tiny baby or a mother gives birth to a very tiny baby, sometimes just 1 kilogram. It's less than half a human baby. And then they start to need to grow. And that will take around 9 to 10 or 11 years. And interestingly, recently in the last days, an article was published where one of the authors is Rebecca Atencia, the director of JHI Congo and Chimpunga. And in this article was shown that chimpanzee youngsters are getting less quick adult in sanctuaries as in zoos. And one of the reasons potentially to that is the food pattern, because they get more enriched food in a zoo, so they grow up quicker. It has influence on their hormones. You can say similar as to humans. One example I want to show you about what is the intention of a long childhood. You can learn, you can experience. This is a youngster in Takugama in Sierra Leone in a sanctuary, where you see how chimpanzees learn, discover how to survive later as an adult one. And one of the things I need to learn is which branch is strong enough to hold my weight, and how can I learn to climb? How can I learn to climb through the trees? And which branch is going to hold my weight? It's nothing that is in their brain when they got born. It's something they need to experience as youngsters. Or like termite fishing, it's something they learn from adults by copying them, imitating them, watching them how an adult male, like in this film, is making a branch useful to fish food in a box and how to get it out. And youngsters love to observe that, lip smacking, sometimes imitating and trying to figure out how adults use these tools. So observing is a way of learning. But chimpanzees are also needing their adults around them to learn about rituals, how to behave in a social group, how to grow up, and how, for example, use these rituals for appeasement, as I've shown you before. So one of the things I love to do is see in young chimpanzees how they find out how to behave towards adults. These are 2 adult males. A youngster is trying to figure out how to behave when 2 adult males are chasing you, and what is allowed in a group and what not. It's similar as to normal human teenagers. At that age, you are trying to figure out what is still allowed, and at what time am I chased, and at what time I maybe get a small bite in my back telling me, okay, now shut up, stop this behavior, you are now crossing a border. I hope I gave you a very short insight in chimpanzee life. We can talk about it hours, and that's not what we're going to do today. I hope that we continue to talk many, many more days, weeks, years about chimpanzees, and more important, that we also continue to study them and developing also the knowledge about the chimpanzees, but maybe also a little bit about our own human behavior. Thank you for your attention, and as I said, enjoy this World Chimpanzee Day.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I'd like to see if there's anyone from the attendees today that have any questions for Patrick. I know we have a few questions that came in advance, so we have some video questions for you that you can answer as well, Patrick. And if you're feeling a bit shy to come off camera, folks, you can also pop that in the Q&A section. Right. It doesn't look like we have a lot of questions from our attendees, but we do have 1 or 2 that we're going to pull up for you, Patrick. So let's see what the youngsters from Roots and Shoots Austria had to ask for you.
What is a chimp's least favorite food?
That's a very interesting one. As far as I know, chimpanzees are similar as to humans, that everybody has his personal favorites. And some chimpanzees we even observe to really eat on stem of small branches or leaves, for example. But we see also some other chimpanzees who absolutely hate that. We know, for example, in zoos, we try to give chimpanzees more and more vegetables instead of sugar-containing fruits. And some of the chimpanzees really hate to eat that. So it sounds a little bit like human young chimpanzees, I would say, is that the more sugar it is containing, the more favorite it is. The less sugar or even no sugar in it, it's the least favorite food. So sweet, salt, that's what is very favorite to them. And specific, the salt food is a very complicated in wildlife. And chimps need, similar as the human salt, they get it, for example, from animal protein like insects, but sometimes that's not available, or licking on stones you can see some chimpanzees do. So salt is really something they love, they need also for survival, but sugar, salt, that's the favorite. I feel sometimes I'm a little bit like a chimpanzee because I hate vegetables too.
Well, thank you, Patrick. We've also got a couple of questions that have popped into the Q&A, into the chat section. So we have, first of all, Ovia Prakash, who is asking, according to scientific research, it's known that an asteroid hit the Earth and almost 95% of human beings and all chimpanzees and monkey species went extinct. But how did the chimpanzees thrive even after this event?
Sorry, I did not get exactly the key of the question. Sorry.
How did chimpanzees thrive?
After we got extinct?
After about 95% of human beings and most of the chimpanzees and monkey species went extinct. How did chimpanzees thrive after an asteroid hit? Ovia, if you'd like to raise your hand, we can also let you come off if you want to chat about that. That's the first question. Borgi also has a question. Why do chimps go to war?
To war? Yeah, one of the reasons is, and this is a very challenging one and a very good question, because there is also human influence. So what you see is that a chimpanzee group, a clan, has a normal dynamic. Sometimes the groups grow, sometimes the number of individuals decrease. And they need a certain amount of food within their territory to survive as a group. If the food resources get limited and not enough anymore for the group, they have to find additional food resources. And that is the moment where they go to war. However, what you also need to understand is, for example, climate change has influence on food available. The pressure from outside the living area of the chimpanzees, for example, decreasing forest, has influence also on the availability of food. So we humans, because of our pressure we are causing, we can, for example, expect in the next years that the number of fights and wars between chimpanzees is going to increase, because there will be a larger competition between the groups. So there is a very strong link between availability of food and the growing and the decrease or increase of numbers within a group, and starting of the fights between the certain different groups.
That's great. Thanks, Patrick. Before we head back to Ovia, we also have another question that popped in the chat. Clarinda would like to know, would you say that chimpanzees are more violent and war-minded than gorillas? Do they go on hunting parties?
Gorillas, you mean? Yeah, no. And that has to do with a food pattern, because if you look, chimpanzees, very unique, survive on fruits, on insects, and that is limited. And so that when you look, for example, to gorillas, they eat leaf, they eat stem of the branches, and that is nearly always available. So for gorillas, there is less importance to have a territory because they are feeding on food that is always available. And actually, there is even a theory. Why do we see in bonobos that they have a less territorial behavior than, for example, gorillas? And one of the thoughts is that bonobos, they eat fruit, insects. There is also rarely seen hunting behavior, similar as to chimps, but they additionally eat also leaves and stem. So they have a wider pattern of food that is available. And one of the reasons we think why are bonobos so different from the chimpanzees is that originally the bonobo area where they are surviving, there have only always been bonobos. Where you see in the gorilla area and the chimpanzee area, they have been overlapping. So one of the theories is that they say, no, gorillas started to feed on the leaves and the stem, and that makes the chimpanzees to go for the fruit and the insects, etc. So food is a very important, and food resources and availability is a very important part of that. Yeah, and I see also common bonobos have a lot of sex. Yes, that is also maybe why they have less and more sex. That's right. The hippie bono or the hippie chimpanzee was sometimes called in literature 30, 40 years ago. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Just going to ask Ovia to ask again about the first question we had. And if you have some time to answer any of the questions after that, in the chat, we'll be handing over to Federico very soon. Ovia.
Yes, sir and ma'am. My doubt that I had put in the question and answer is basically when I was researching about these chimpanzees last week, I had found that according to scientific research, it is known that an asteroid, a big asteroid, hit the Earth, and almost 95% of all the human beings, including most of the animals, that is most of the animal species and all of the chimpanzees and monkeys were extinct until then. But then later on, there is no research regarding how these chimpanzees had come, like how do they thrive or how do they actually live and multiply even after this event.
Yeah. We know, of course, not exactly what happened. Thank you, Via, for the clarification and how that worked. But one of the challenges for having healthy groups and groups that can survive is that the number of individuals within the group has a large variety in genetic material. And maybe this learns us also a little bit about the current challenge is that it's not the large number of animals that are still around, because recently somebody said to me, yeah, but if we know that there are still 100,000 or 210,000 chimpanzees around, why are they then endangered? Because that is a large number. And I said, yes, if you put all these 100,000 chimpanzees in one city, they are probably going to survive. But imagine that these 100 chimpanzees are scattered around through complete Europe, or I'm European, so I use Europe as an example because I can imagine what the size of the country is, and everybody is living in small, scattered around small villages of just 100 individuals or 50 individuals, and you do not have an opportunity to travel to the other village, then you are going to be extinct. So probably what happened, it's just a theory to think of, is that the population that survived was close enough and had the opportunity also to move around and migrate between the subgroups to survive as a complete group. And that's also what we learn about the current challenge, is that groups are too small. Some groups are too small to survive if we are not in time to build corridors. And that's the biggest challenge. So if a group is large enough with a large genetic variety, they can survive. If they're not, then it becomes very difficult. And I think that is also what happened after the asteroid.
Okay, so thank you so much. So in conclusion, it is basically that these chimpanzees came or mingled with these humans and other similar genetic people, and then they thrived, right? So
Yeah, you need to have a population that's healthy enough to survive, and that's important. So they had to mingle also
true.
with other chimpanzee groups or monkey group, or we even do not know what type of species survived at that moment, because sometimes we think when we talk about millions years back in time, we think about animals that look exactly similar as the current animals, or humans that look exactly similar as to the current human species, but probably were completely different subspecies, and that resulted in the current modern chimpanzee or in the current modern human.